in the Farm Bill, and in addition to the SNAP program.
Washington Journal airs live every morning starting at 7 Eastern here on C-SPAN. We're going live back to the House for votes on measures debated earlier.
Approval of the Journal de novo. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 258, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 59, H.R. 258, a bill to amend Title 18, United States Code, with respect to fraudulent representations about having received military declarations or medals.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
Three votes in this series. This first one on the Stolen Valor Act that would make it illegal to lie about being awarded a military medal for financial gain. In 2005, the Supreme Court struck down a law that said a person could not lie about receiving the Medal of Honor. Back then, the law did not include the motivation of financial gain, as the bill before the House today does. In addition to the House this evening, we'll also have live coverage of Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He's speaking at the New Hampshire Republican State Committee Liberty Dinner in Concord. Senator Paul has said that he's considering a run for the White House, but will not make a final decision until 2014. You can see his comments live at 7:40 p.m. Eastern on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. The Senate Judiciary Committee continues to review amendments to the immigration bill. The markup is expected to go late tonight and then again late tomorrow night. We plan to watch some of the markup live during this vote. But first, an update on what the House and Senate are doing this week.
Senior staff writer for The Hill. The Senate plans to devote their work week to the Farm Bill. What are some of the key issues that we should expect to see come to the floor?
Well, one of the key issues is reducing money for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the SNAP program. It's the largest assistance program targeted at low-income families, and that's where the savings from this bill are coming from, and it's what enables it to get the Republican support it needs to pass the Senate. So the chamber will be focused on that issue. Another thing it does is it reduces subsidies. Subsidies for farmers making under $750,000 a year would be limited. And another issue is phasing out subsidies for corn and cotton.
A broad question now. What is the Farm Bill? And didn't we see lawmakers working on a Farm Bill last year?
We did, and the Senate passed the Farm Bill, but the House did not take action on the Farm Bill. The difference this year is House Republicans say they're going to be moving on it in June, so there at least seems to be more buy-in from House Republicans than we saw last year. What it is an authorization bill that sets new subsidy formulas for crops. And so it rejiggers the formulas so that different crops get different preferences, different aid going forward.
What is Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's timetable for finishing the Farm Bill?
Well, Leader Reid would love to have this done by the end of the week so that after the Memorial Day recess, Congress can, or the Senate can then move to the immigration bill. But my colleague Eric Wasson, who covers the Farm Bill for us, tells me that lobbyists tracking the bill say that it'll be virtually impossible to get this done by the end of the week.
Now, the House has a couple of substantive bills coming up later this week. One deals with the Keystone Pipeline. What's in that bill?
Well, this would give a permit to TransCanada Corp to build the northern leg of the Keystone Pipeline across the Canada-U.S. border. Right now, the builder of the pipeline needs to get a permission from President Obama. Republicans accuse the president of having dragged his feet on the issue. This would expedite the matter. It would supply that permit, and it's expected to pass with overwhelming Republican support and draw as many as 20 Democrats.
Now, the other substantive measure that the House would be dealing with this week is student loan interest rates. What is proposed in that measure?
Well, this is a pressing issue because on July 1st, the interest rate for Stafford loans will jump from 3.4% to 6.8%. This was a big fight in the last Congress. In 2012, Republicans finally backed down after a pitched battle with Democrats on the issue. What House Republicans are proposing and the legislation they'll be bringing to the floor from the Education Committee would peg the rates, the interest rates for Stafford loans to Treasury bills, to the federal interest rate. And so the subsidy would be the Treasury, the interest rate plus a couple percentage points. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that in 2014 this would put the interest rate at around 5%, and that in 2023 the interest rate could go as high as 7.7%. And that's why this has become a very, very partisan bill. It did not win any Democratic votes out of the Education Committee. Democrats warned that the interest rate, while low now, could surge in the years ahead, and that would hurt students. What Democrats want to do is freeze the interest rate at 3.4% and give Congress more time to work out a long-term solution.
Alexander Bolton is the senior staff writer for The Hill. Thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And there'll be 2 hearings on Capitol Hill over the next couple of days on what happened at the IRS. Tomorrow, the Senate Finance Committee will look at the criteria used by the IRS to determine when an application for nonprofit status needs greater scrutiny. And that's tomorrow morning at 10 Eastern on C-SPAN 3. And on Wednesday, also on C-SPAN 3, the House Oversight Committee will hear testimony about targeting Americans for their political beliefs. And we'll have that live at 9:30 Eastern, also on C-SPAN 3. The Senate Judiciary Committee continues to review amendments to the immigration bill. One amendment that passed and was added to the bill today would require foreigners leaving the country through any of the nation's 30th busiest airports to undergo mandatory fingerprinting. As this vote continues in the House, we'll watch the opening statements from the markup.
Refugees, Section 3403 allows the President to admit into our country and grant permanent legal status to an entire classes of aliens that are classified as refugees. Currently, refugees undergo specialized and individualized assessment. Why does the bill dramatically expand refugee law in this manner? It seems to imply that the current system in which we bring in over 75,000 people per year isn't adequate.
Well, first, let me say that it does not expand the refugee status, but every single person has to go through the review. I think what you're referring to is Senator Lautenberg's offering each year as part of the appropriation process, the so-called Lautenberg Amendment. And what Frank has done, and I think done well, is to say, rather than proving up, for example, in every case that, going back in history, you were a Jew in the Soviet Union and discriminated against, we are going to accept the premise that Jewish people in the Soviet Union were discriminated against, or a Coptic Christian in Egypt, or a Christian or someone who is an evangelical Christian in Iran today. So instead of saying every single person who comes before the immigration court has to prove up the premise that his class is being discriminated against in a country, we establish that there are certain known examples of discrimination which we can refer to by reference rather than proving up in each case. Okay. And as my staff reminded me, still, every single person is subject to extensive security checks I described earlier.
Let me move on to interior enforcement. This would involve new judges, staff attorneys, and support staff. And basically it gets at the proposition we're making these decisions way ahead of time through this legislation and maybe not knowing exactly what's needed right now. This is the premise. The bill mandates the hiring of at least 75 immigration court judges over the next 3 years, as well as at least one staff attorney or law clerk and one legal assistant for each immigration judge. In addition, the bill mandates the hiring of at least 30 staff attorneys, including the necessary additional support staff for the next 3 years. So, as I indicated, that's a lot of new judges, attorneys, and support staff. I note that these are mandatory hirings of new judges, attorneys, etc. The bill provides for no downward discretion with respect to these hirings. The reality is that we don't know whether the immigration court caseload will increase or decrease under this bill, especially with a massive new RPI program. 2 questions. Why is this a mandatory hiring of new judges, etc., and not an authorization for more personnel if circumstances so warrant based on demonstrated needs? And then let me follow it up with a second question. That's only 2 questions in this area. Shouldn't there be a study to determine the true need for these judges and additional new attorneys, staff, etc., before we start mandating?
Thank you, Senator. And let me say that I know you've been sensitive to this when it comes to the Article III courts, the caseload, and I want you to consider what we are facing now when it comes to the immigration courts. There are currently 259 immigration judges in our country, sitting in 58 different immigration court locations. The caseloads for each of these judges have increased dramatically over the last several years. 186,000 cases are pending in immigration courts as of the end of 2008. By 2012, it was up to 326,000, from 186 to 326,000, a 75% increase in just 4 years. 1,200 pending matters is the average per immigration judge, 1,200 cases. Let me tell you what it comes down to. Average processing time for cases in immigration courts nationwide is about 4 months, 123 days, where the individual is detained, and more than 3 years in cases where the individual is not detained. When we are detaining a person, questioning their status, and I've been to some of these detention centers, it costs us over $100 a day as taxpayers to detain them. So if we slow down the court process, we are building up the backlog in detention. And I might add, the reason why we're moving forward on this is we can't realistically say to people, we're going to move you through a process that could involve literally millions of people in this country without expanding those who will stand in judgment of some important questions. We'll raise some of those questions today. Criminal backgrounds. If I'm applying for the 10-year RPI status, is there something in my background which disqualifies me? There's going to have to be a resolution of that. And we want to make sure that's done on a timely basis. And that's the reason we've done this.
Your answer brings up this. Since we're legalizing...
Some of the opening statements from earlier today before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The markup of the immigration bill came back into session a few minutes ago. We're going to watch part of it live during this vote.
On that point of whether or not we ought to have any limit at all, there's some people that believe there shouldn't be any limit. The present law is 1 year. We had some private discussion around here that some members could go along with 5 years, and then some members objected to that. And we've had this suggestion of 2.5 years, and I think there should be some limit. Obviously, you, Mr. Chairman, think that there shouldn't be. And maybe with good reason, but I'd like to proceed with the amendment.
No, we'll certainly be able to proceed with the amendment. I think of some of the cases that come before our committee and that some of us have seen, where you have women seeking asylum because of sexual abuse, trauma, sometimes forced into sex slavery and otherwise. They may have a delayed filing because of whatever the culture is they come from, the shame and the fear of that. They don't. Additionally, we've had female applicants incorrectly advise their gender-based claims for asylum are not strong cases until they find out later they are. Well, you know, I'm concerned about fraud. You're concerned about fraud. We all are. But delaying and filing can still be a factor. And I think we're going to find some of the most traumatized victims are often the slowest to file. They're suffering from PTSD. They're distrustful of government, oftentimes for very good reasons, depending on where they're coming from. So I'd much rather keep with the original bill as written. But Senator Durbin?
All I can say is I'd hoped that we would have been able to work out an agreement on how to approach this, but we haven't reached that point. I'll be voting no on both sections of this amendment. If it is not, if either section is not successful, let us continue the negotiation.
And I appreciate the fact that Senator from Iowa has divided this in half. The part that he has before us, so is I cannot agree to. Does he want a roll call or a?
Yeah, I'd like to have a roll call.
Clerk will call it.
Both divisions.
Okay, we're doing this on the striking of section 3401 and 3404.
Yes.
Is the first one. Okay. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Feinstein.
Aye. Aye, proxy.
Mr. Schumer. Mr. Durbin.
No.
Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No.
For proxy.
No.
Mr. Franken.
No.
Mr. Coons.
No.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No more proxy.
No more proxy.
Ms. Hirono. Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Hatch.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
No, with the understanding we will try to find some solution to this problem.
Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Cruz.
I don't see it. Aye by proxy.
Mr. Clayton. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Blumenthal will be recorded as voting in person.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 6 yeas, 12 nays.
The amendment on vote one is not agreed to, and the senator who has the perfect right to do this, of course, has split it into two. We're now on the second.
Yeah. And I'd like to have a roll call there, too.
Okay. Should we call it?
Mr. Chairman.
The clerk. Oh, Senator Rona wishes to speak on the second one.
Yes, I'd like to speak on the Second Amendment. I recognize and appreciate that Senator Grassley is concerned about protecting against fraud in the asylum process. However, we are dealing with a population of people for whom there are language issues, there is lack of adequate representation. So a frivolous finding in this context is not the same as fraud. And as I said, it's not uncommon for asylum applicants who often have little English proficiency or little money for an attorney to receive poor representation, which can result in a frivolous finding even if they have a legitimate claim. It would be unfair to bar these people from legalization for the errors of an incompetent attorney. So I think the provisions in the underlying base bill are adequate with regard to fraud, and I will oppose this amendment.
Could I respond to the senator? remember that present law bans all benefits for what we're doing. We're only doing it for RPI, but present law does it for everything.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Feinstein.
Under proxy.
Mr. Schumer.
No.
Mr. Durbin.
No.
Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No, under proxy.
Mr. Franken.
No.
Mr. Coons.
No.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
Ms. Roanoke. Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Hatch.
I by proxy.
Mr. Sessions.
I by proxy.
Mr. Graham. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee. Mr. Cruz.
I by proxy.
Mr. Flake. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, the votes are 9 yeas, 9 nays.
The bill's on a tie, and we've now, not further amendments to Title III, the Interior Enforcement title. We'll close that title. Move on to our final title, Title II, Legalization. We'll begin with Subtitle A to Title II. Senator Coons has
Is this where we are now?
amendment. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Leahy. I'd like to call up Coons 10.
Coons 10 will be before us.
With the Chairman's permission, I'd like to modify my amendment by the second-degree amendment that I've circulated, which makes a technical correction with the instructions.
Without objection, the amendment is amended with the second degree and technical amendments, and that is the amendment as amended is before the committee.
This amendment ensures that immigrants who are authorized to work in the United States are able to do so in a way that abides by all appropriate laws governing licensure of professions and businesses. Specifically, under the bill before us, the new RPI, or Registered Provisional Immigrant Tract, requires individuals to maintain consistent employment in order to stay in legal status. And today, many professions, as many members of this committee know, from lawyers to barbers, require licenses, and this amendment ensures qualified individuals can obtain these licenses and provide services in accordance with all laws. In addition, many new immigrants will start small businesses that will add to our economy. This amendment will ensure those businesses are able to operate in accordance with laws and regulations, many of which are also designed to advance public health and public safety. I believe this is a necessary and reasonable amendment, and I urge my colleagues' support.
Is there further discussion? And without further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Grassley, do you have an amendment?
Yeah, I do have. I would have liked to have raised some questions about that last amendment, but I didn't get there in time. This would be amendment number 11. This bill has the toughest enforcement measure in history of our country. That's what we've been told by the authors. And that allowing those here illegally to stay will improve our national security because we're bringing people out of the shadows. However, this bill as drafted doesn't match up with that rhetoric. So I want to discuss 4 provisions in the bill and how they undermine our ability to enforce the law and give more priority to ensuring that people here illegally get legal status. First, on page 72, the bill discusses how people who are apprehended before or during the application period shall be afforded with an opportunity to file an application. Moreover, the Secretary cannot remove the individual until a final administrative determination is made on the application. How will this provision play out? If an immigration agent apprehends an individual in a stash house or speeding along the highways, the person can claim they're eligible for the program. Does the agent have to supply them with an application and let them go? If so, enforcement agents won't be able to do their job. In other words, the enforcement agents' hands are tied. Second, the bill says people who departed the United States and are outside the country are not eligible for the legalization program. But on that same page, the bill provides a waiver of this rule. My amendment strikes a waiver and ensures that individuals outside the United States cannot use this avenue to jump the lines and bypass the legal process. Third, the Department of Homeland Security is not required to detain or remove individuals with RPI status during the application process unless they're ineligible or had their RPI status revoked. My amendment alters this section to give the Secretary the authority to detain or initiate removal proceedings if the individual with RPI status is or has become removable under Section 237 of our Immigration Act. Fourth, under the bill, people that are currently in deportation proceedings can apply for legalization. On page 76 it says, quote, "The Secretary shall provide an alien with the opportunity to file an application, and the Executive Office of Immigration Review shall terminate such proceedings without prejudice to further proceedings on any basis," end of quote. My amendment would make all people in the removal proceedings ineligible for relief under the Act. It's hard to square this provision with the other provisions in the Act, and I'll give you examples. In Section 2101, if a person commits certain crimes, they're ineligible for legalization. Immediately after listing out these crimes, the bill says, quote, "Nothing in this paragraph may be construed to require the Secretary to commence removal proceedings against an alien," end of quote. The same applies for aliens who receive legalization and then later commit serious crimes. The Secretary isn't required to revoke RPI status if the alien later becomes ineligible due to committing these crimes. These provisions combined ensure that every person in this country illegally gets a chance at legalization. The bill ensures that we find every person with a pulse and give them an opportunity to apply. They can apply, be denied, and apply again. The bill ensures that in the end, the alien wins. If the bill were to pass without my amendment, the Department would be forced to be a service-oriented bureaucracy. Agents in the field would be forced to turn a blind eye to illegality. The provisions I discussed say a lot about what this bill truly does. Unfortunately, they're not provisions that the sponsors talk about.
Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1073, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 60, H.R. 1073, a bill to amend Title 18, United States Code, to provide for protection of maritime navigation and prevention of nuclear terrorism and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
The second vote on a measure that would change the criminal code to prohibit violent acts against ships and offshore platforms, as well as the transport of weapons of mass destruction. A summary from Congressional Quarterly says the bill will bring U.S. maritime laws into line with several international treaties. As this vote continues, we'll watch a little more from the Senate Judiciary Committee reviewing amendments to the immigration bill.
Is that what you want to achieve?
I want the enforcement provisions of this law and the legalization provisions of this law to be what you folks sell it for. and I don't think that this does it, and my amendment brings it back to what you say you want to do.
So let me give you an example. Let us assume that you are eligible to apply for this RPI, this temporary 10-year status, and you either haven't completed the application or whatever, but you're clearly undocumented, living in America, want to take advantage of this bill. And you are apprehended for deportation for no other reason than the fact that you are here without documentation. In other words, you're not being apprehended for committing a crime, robbing a bank or whatever it might be, but simply for the fact that you're here undocumented. What we're trying to say is, for the good of these families, we're going to give these folks a chance, and the simple apprehension for status, that is undocumented status, should not disqualify them. I think what your amendment does, it disqualifies them, and that moves beyond what we've even described to be the intent of the bill.
We hire thousands and thousands of people to be ICE agents, and I want ICE agents to be able to do their job. You expect them to do their job today? There might be some damping put on that by this administration to some extent, but it's still the law. They're hired to do a job, and it seems to me you limit what they can do.
Senator, over the weekend I met a fellow named Pedro Pedroza, who lives in Chicago now, and he recently graduated from Cornell University. And he has a degree and looking forward now in his DACA status. He was stopped on a bus in New York going back to school at Cornell, and they checked his papers and said, "You're undocumented," and sought to deport him. We managed to keep that from happening. But he had not committed a crime. He was here undocumented. Will the ICE agents have anything to do other than this? Of course they will. They are going to be helping to determine which people are eligible, only those before December 31st, 2011, and they're undoubtedly going to be part of the process of saying some will not be eligible, even if they were here before that date. So what we're trying to do is to get beyond where we are today, with 11 million undocumented whose only sin or only crime is the fact that they do not have official documentation. I think your amendment is still going to disqualify them, and that goes against what we were trying to achieve in this bill, and I would unfortunately oppose it.
I think I yield if you want to move ahead.
Voice vote or roll call?
I'd like to have a roll call.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Feinstein. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Franken.
No.
Mr. Hughes.
No.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
Ms. Hirono. Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Hatch.
Aye, Proxy.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye.
Mr. Graham.
No.
Mr. Cornyn.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye, Proxy.
Mr. Flake.
No.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 6 yeas, 12 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. The next amendment is Blumenthal 12. And Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call Blumenthal 12, which amends the section of the Act that is prominently known as the DREAM Act. And I want to thank the Group of 8 for including the DREAM Act. I know that Senator Durbin has fought relentlessly and tirelessly for the dreamers of this nation, and this act will represent a tremendous victory for fairness and decency and for the many, many dreamers who are among us, young people who were brought to this country as infants or young children through no choice or fault of their own, and know this country as the only home they have ever known. English is often their only language, and their friends and life are here in this country. And I want to thank him for his championing this cause over many years. I have done so as State Attorney General, privileged to join him since coming here to the United States Senate in advocating this cause. I will be offering at some point, perhaps not in the committee markup, but at some point I hope what I have called the Little Dreamers Amendment, which applies to young people who will still be too young, children who meet the requirements of the DREAM Act but are still too young, under the age of 18, upon completing the 5 years of registered provisional immigrant status to adjust lawfully to permanent resident status. They simply are under the age to qualify for the provisions that enable them to become citizens on an expedited path once they have graduated from high school or earned a GED and have earned a college diploma or attended 2 years of college or spent 4 years in the military, the normal qualifications that apply to the Dreamers, and simply because they have come here too young, they would not otherwise qualify. I hope to offer that Little Dreamers Amendment at some point. That is not the amendment that I am offering now. Instead, Blumenthal 12 essentially provides that immigrants, the Dreamers, who signs up for the military and has committed to a 4-year requirement and serves 1 year in the military.
2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the Journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
During the last couple of votes, we've been watching the Senate Judiciary Committee review amendments to the immigration bill. Their review of those amendments will continue late tonight. You can see our live coverage on C-SPAN 3. The last vote of the day on what's called the Journal, which is the record of the previous day's proceedings. A number of issues are expected to come to the House floor later this week, including a measure that aims to stop further delays in the construction of the Keystone Oil Pipeline that would carry crude oil from northern Canada to refineries in Texas. The Obama administration has said it's needed more time to review the project. Here's more about what the House and Senate are doing this week.
Staff writer for The Hill. The Senate plans to devote their work week to the Farm Bill. What are some of the key issues that we should expect to see come to the floor?
Well, one of the key issues is reducing money for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the SNAP program. It's the largest assistance program targeted at low-income families, and that's where the savings from this bill are coming from, and it's what enables it to get the Republican support it needs to pass the Senate. So the chamber will be focused on that issue. Another thing it does is it reduces subsidies. Subsidies for farmers making under $750,000 a year would be limited. And another issue is phasing out subsidies for corn and cotton.
A broad question now. What is the Farm Bill? And didn't we see lawmakers working on a Farm Bill last year?
We did. And the Senate passed the Farm Bill, but the House did not take action on the Farm Bill. The difference this year is House Republicans say they're going to be moving on it in June, so there at least seems to be more buy-in from House Republicans than we saw last year. What it is an authorization bill that sets new subsidy formulas for crops. And so it rejiggers the formulas so that different crops get different preferences, different aid going forward.
What is Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's timetable for finishing the Farm Bill?
Well, Leader Reid would love to have this done by the end of the week so that after the Memorial Day recess, Congress can, or the Senate can then move to the immigration bill. But my colleague Eric Wasson, who covers the Farm Bill for us, tells me that lobbyists tracking the bill say that it will be virtually impossible to get this done by the end of the week.
Now, the House has a couple of substantive bills coming up later this week. One deals with the Keystone Pipeline. What's in that bill?
Well, this would give a permit to TransCanada Corp to build the northern leg of the Keystone Pipeline across the Canada-U.S. border. Right now, the builder of the pipeline needs to get a permission from President Obama. Republicans accuse the president of having dragged his feet on the issue. This would expedite the matter. It would supply that permit, and it's expected to pass with overwhelming Republican support and draw as many as 20 Democrats.
Now, the other substantive measure that the House would be dealing with this week is student loan interest rates. What is proposed in that measure?
Well, this is a pressing issue because on July 1st, the interest rate for Stafford loans will jump from 3.4% to 6.8%. This was a big fight in the last Congress. In 2012, Republicans finally backed down after a pitched battle with Democrats on the issue. What House Republicans are proposing, and the legislation they'll be bringing to the floor from the Education Committee, would peg the rates, the interest rates for Stafford loans to Treasury bills, to the federal interest rate. And so the subsidy would be the Treasury, the interest rate plus a couple percentage points. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that in 2014 this would put the interest rate at around 5%, and that in 2023 the interest rate could go as high as 7.7%. And that's why this has become a very, very partisan bill. It did not win any Democratic votes out of the Education Committee. Democrats warned that the interest rate, while low now, could surge in the years ahead, and that would hurt students. What Democrats want to do is freeze the interest rate at 3.4% and give Congress more time to work out a long-term solution.
Alexander Bolton is the senior staff writer for The Hill. Thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
In addition to the House this evening, we'll also have live coverage of Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He's speaking at the New Hampshire Republican State Committee Liberty Dinner in Concord. You can see his comments live at 7:40 p.m. Eastern over on C-SPAN 2.
On this vote, the yeas are 262 and the nays are 125, with one answering present. The journal stands approved. Can I go to this?
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Where is he? For what purposes does the gentleman from Florida rise?
I rise to give notice of a question of the privileges of the House pursuant to Rule 9. The form of my resolution is as follows. Resolution HRS.
The House will be in order. Proceed, sir.
HRS 225, raising a question of the privileges of the House, resolved that the House of Representatives shall not consider H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, because 1, it violates Rule 21 of the House, and 2, it affects the dignity and integrity of the proceedings of the House since it is unconstitutional. I request debate.
Under Rule 9, a resolution offered from the floor by a member other than the majority leader or the minority leader as a question of the privileges of the House has immediate precedence only at a time designated by the chair within 2 legislative days after the resolution is properly noticed. Pending that designation, the form of the unnumbered resolution noticed by the gentleman from Florida will appear at the record at this point. The chair will not at this point determine whether the resolution constitutes a question of privilege. That determination will be made at the time designated for consideration of the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentlelady from West Virginia rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Wednesday, the House will vote to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. This vote will come with after more than 1,700 days since the application for the project was filed. Despite the outpouring of support from the American people, the President continues to delay the approval of the Keystone pipeline, which would directly create 20,000 jobs and lead to $7 billion in spending. The President keeps dragging his feet. Business and labor organizations have joined together to support the Keystone project because it will bring jobs to American workers. West Virginians support the Keystone pipeline. The permitting delay is standing in the way of the Keystone project, demonstrates that this administration and its environmental agenda will put everything ahead of our nation's economy and jobs for working Americans. Mr. Speaker, an energy economy is a jobs economy, and I hope my colleagues will join me in fighting back against the administration's anti-energy agenda. Passing H.R. 3 would mean more American jobs and move us closer towards energy independence. And I yield back.
Thank you, ma'am. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Student loan debt in the United States now exceeds $1 trillion, higher than our country's total credit card debt. And unless Congress acts on July 1st, federal student loans will double, rising from 3.4% to 6.4%. This increase in student loan rates would be unbearable for many undergraduate students and future students. It also will keep them out of the middle class. The middle class, as we know right now, is shrinking. If you're in the middle class today, you're making approximately $5,000 less than you were 10 years ago, and you have nearly $25,000 more in personal debt. Access to education powers the innovation economy and will increase and grow our middle class. Unfortunately, H.R. 1911, the Republican student loan plan to come to the floor this week, will only make college more expensive. The Republicans' Make College More Expensive plan will make loan rates variable, going as high as 8.5%. Their plan essentially will build a great wall around our middle class. We must deal with the student loan crisis now. Instead of increasing student loan rates for students, Congress should be helping students by keeping student loan rates low. and increasing the student loan rate interest deduction. Let's tear down this wall that will keep our students from the middle class and do not increase the student loan rate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Benghazi bungled, propagandocrats mislead citizens, change talking points 12 times. People die, White House denies knowledge, lower-level operatives blamed. IRS intimidates, targets, and audits conservative opposition groups, White House denies knowledge, lower-level operatives blamed. Government snoopers secretly seize phone records of 100 journalists to locate their sources. White House denies knowledge, lower-level operatives blamed. ATF smuggles guns to Mexican drug lords. White House denies knowledge. Attorney General held in contempt of Congress for withholding evidence. Lower-level operatives blamed. Meanwhile, the President self-righteously proclaims citizens should trust his government. Americans distrust and fear government, especially the Internal Revenue Service, because the President professes ignorance of actions of lower-level malcontents, then doesn't adequately hold them accountable. Heads need to roll. People need to be fired. Others need to go to the jailhouse. That's what Americans expect of the so-called most transparent administration in history. Then this administration that is incredible with words can earn credibility with its deeds. And that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the public is split 50-50 on whether the science of climate change is settled, there is overwhelming agreement, over 97% among climate scientists, that the human activity of this earth is causing climate change. Imagine if we compare that percentage to the medical field. If 97% of 100 doctors told you that you have cancer, would you refuse to take a treatment? Whether one believes that humans are contributing to climate change is in some ways irrelevant, because we are certainly paying for its effect. The federal government spent $96 billion in 2012 to clean up after extreme weather events. That's nearly 3 times the amount paid by private insurers. That is more than we spent on transportation or education. Though many have yet to embrace the facts that climate research has found, we must take action to mitigate these growing costs. As Ben Franklin once said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
To request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of Oklahomans who, even as we speak this evening, are laboring to find and rescue all those affected by this afternoon's severe tornadoes in Moore and other areas in the great state of Oklahoma. At this time, we don't know the full extent of the damage and the potential human toll, but we are inspired. We are inspired by those who are sparing no effort to assist their neighbors and even many people they don't know. Disasters like the Moore tornado bring out the best in the people of Oklahoma. I pray for each victim of these storms, for all of the emergency responders and the ordinary citizens who are stepping forward to help in any way they can. We are grateful for everyone working to secure the affected area and to account for every man, woman, and child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it has been 1 year since human rights activist Chen Guocheng and his wife Yuan Wei-jing arrived in the United States of America. I recently had the honor of meeting both Chen and Yuan. They are heroes in the cause of human rights, and their story of fighting forced abortion and sterilization in the People's Republic of China has captivated and inspired all those who love freedom. Their courageous stand has not come without a personal price. Chen and Yuan's extended family in China has been subject to continued harassment. It is time for this to stop. Respect for human life and freedom are universal aspirations, and Chen and Yuan serve as witnesses to these transcendent values. I encourage Beijing to protect Chen Guocheng's family and all those who serve as advocates for freedom and human rights. I thank the Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate a longtime Minnesota nonprofit organization, Opportunity Partners, for serving the needs of developmentally disabled adults for 60 years. The latest statistics reveal that only 33% of Americans aged 18 to 64 with disabilities are employed. Now, the founders of Opportunity Partners recognize the many challenges that the disabled encounter when trying to integrate into the workforce, so they acted, creating an organization that gives ongoing support to people with disabilities, helping them lead independent and fulfilling lives. In 1953, Opportunity Partners was serving 15 teens with disabilities, and now today the organization is reaching over 1,700 people and equipping them with the work skills and the training these individuals need to gain successful employment. I've toured this amazing operation myself, Mr. Speaker. I've seen firsthand the lives that are impacted and affected by Opportunity Partners. The staff and the volunteers are dedicated to empowering others through a simple but powerful mission to help those with disabilities to live, learn, and work. Mr. Speaker, I want to extend my congratulations and a thank you to all those at Opportunities who serve Minnesota. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina. For what purpose does she rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without consent. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Job killers win, American workers lose, is how the Laborers International Union of North America, a rare critic of the administration, summed up the President's 2011 call to block the Keystone XL pipeline. The move, they said, would inflict a potentially fatal delay to a project that is not just a pipeline, but is a lifeline for thousands of desperate working men and women. And what of America's energy needs or diplomatic priorities? By cutting off access to North American oil, it is American consumers who will continue to suffer, not the Canadian companies seeking to permit the Keystone pipeline. TransCanada's chief executive noted, quote, if Keystone XL dies, Americans will still wake up the next morning and continue to import 10 million barrels of oil from repressive nations without the benefit of thousands of jobs and long-term energy security, end quote. When jobs and affordable North American energy are at stake, Americans deserve better than groundless delays from the President. Let's build a pipeline today. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection.
Thank you. Speaker, I know that many of our colleagues in the tornado corridor are not here today. I want to offer my deepest concern and prayers as the recovery begins, and praying for those who've lost their lives. Some, of course,